Good afternoon, everyone. So this will be our agenda. I think Jenny mentioned briefly how the various pieces of it will be addressed, so I won't dwell on it anymore, but we'll just carry on into the program. I'd like to first set the stage in terms of regulatory approach. The AER is taking steps towards a more performance-based regulatory approach as opposed to a more prescriptive rule-based approach. So the Safety and Loss Management System Review is one step in this journey. Although having an SLMS is with certain elements in it is a regulatory requirement, what the licensee puts into the SLMS is under each element, and how the SLMS is implemented is dependent on the situation to the licensee. As the AER is looking for effective implementation of the SLMS, this program again is very much outcome-based. Thus, you should not expect to hear much in the way of anything today that will be prescriptive, such as how to fill out the self-assessment that we will be highlighting in a few minutes. The definition I have here for SLMS comes from the commentary in section 3.1 of CSA Z662, which defines the safety and loss management system as a systematic, comprehensive, and proactive process for the management of safety and loss control associated with activities throughout the life cycle of a pipeline. It is intended to provide a framework for managing and understanding the interactions and interrelations between system components so that system failures resulting from dysfunctional interactions can be better anticipated and managed. In other words, SLMS is an overarching system or framework for managing pipelines. As such, other processes and procedures, such as those associated with integrity management programs, are part of the overarching SLMS. The elements of an SLMS are noted in Clause 3 of Z662. I won't go through all the elements, but I want to touch on a few of them. Arguably, the most important element is leadership commitment and clearly articulated policy. Safety and loss control policy should be developed that is communicated throughout the licensee's organization and is seen to be fully supported by the licensee's leadership. Management of resources is another important component. It should include training and competency needs and ensure the employees and contractors are performing their roles in a manner that conforms to the requirements of the management system. Another element that's important is having appropriate document and records control. It doesn't sound like a glamorous or exciting control, but we have had some notable pipeline incidents where the pipeline licensee did not have all the information they needed to properly operate their pipeline safely. With these elements, the SLMS is a documented framework of policies, practices, procedures, and operational controls to manage human, technological, and financial resources that support the safe operations of pipelines throughout the life cycle, from design and construction to operation, maintenance, and abandonment. This graph shows pipeline incidents in Alberta from 2007 to 2016. Those of you at the back may not be able to see this, so I'll describe the lines a little bit. The top line shows the trend for low consequence incidents. These have been decreasing. This may be due to a combination of better management systems, improved technology, and better standards. The AER has also put more inspection focus on ensuring preventive maintenance programs are being effectively implemented and that companies have adequate leak detection. The two bottom lines show the trend for medium and high consequence events. As you can see, those trends are flat. Technology and regulations can only get you so far. Incident reviews show that nearly some aspect of SLMS is missing in nearly all the incidents. One or more SLMS incidences listed in earlier slides was identified to have a causal relationship to the incident. This is why the AER is putting more emphasis on SLMS, and we will be expecting industry to also put more emphasis on it. Pipeline licensees with effective SLMS have relatively fewer pipeline incidences, according to our data. What's the purpose of the SLMS review program? There are immediate, intermediate, and ultimate outcomes that the AER is aiming for. The immediate outcome that we are expecting is that industry has a greater understanding and awareness of SLMS. As part of this, the AER gains a basic level of information about the state of SLMS in industry. The intermediate outcome is the behavior change we are looking for in industry to proactively address gaps in their SLMS. We would like to see a maturing of SLMS overall. Ultimately, the improvements in SLMS effectiveness is expected to have an impact on the number of incidents and safety of pipelines. There are 6 components to the SLMS review program. The first is an AER letter requesting completion of a self-assessment and declaration form. Not all pipeline licensees are asked to complete the self-assessment form at one time. The self-assessment form is sent to a subset of licensees on a rotating basis. Self-assessment is to be completed by pipeline licensees and returned to the AER. The third element is a declaration. A senior official is asked to sign a declaration stating the pipeline licensee's commitment to a management system to ensure safe operation of their pipelines. This is similar to the declaration you may already be familiar with under the Enhanced Production Audit Program, otherwise known as EPAP, under Directive 76. The fourth component in the program is the in-depth review. For some licensees, an in-depth review will be conducted. Selection of the licensees for this review is based on the results of the self-assessment coupled with compliance history, inspection results, pipeline performance, and incident investigation results. The review will consist of more detailed questions than are in the self-assessment. Fifth element is addressing gaps. Gaps are areas of improvement identified either during the self-assessment or during the in-depth review need to be addressed by pipeline licensees. The AER will meet with licensees during the in-depth review to discuss how the licensee will address gaps and areas for improvement and the time the work will be completed. And finally, the AER will track progress towards closing identified gaps and ensuring that the industry is responsive to addressing the gaps in a timely manner. The licensee would submit documentation to show that gaps have been closed. The SLMS review program has been initiated. The AER has sent 50 licensees a letter requesting that they complete the self-assessment and declarations. The letters were sent on April 19th with a deadline date for submission of June 14th. The criteria for selecting licensees to receive the letter included pipeline length and pipeline incidents. We also included licensees with recent or planned audits from the NEB or British Columbia Oil and Gas Commission, as well as those licensees that were being looked at under any other AER program. The letters are based on a unique BA code. Pipeline licensees with multiple BA codes may have received a letter for each respective BA code. A single response covering all the BA codes is okay as long as it's clear which BA codes are being covered. Future tranches of letters will be issued. Licensees will be based on a similar criteria. Also, some licensees who received letter in a previous cycle and who had completed work to improve their safety management system may receive a letter so the AER can assess the maturity of their SLMS. There may also be an element of randomness. If you have received a letter, you are being asked to complete the form and return it by June 14th. Completing and returning the self-assessment as well as the declaration is voluntary. I'll have a couple more things to say about that in a minute. If you have not received a letter, you can still download the self-assessment form and do your own self-assessment. However, you are not being asked to return this to the AER unless you've actually received a request. I'm not going to go through a lot of detail through the form, but I'll just highlight a few things. The form is intended to assist the AER in evaluating whether licensees have implemented effective SLMS and to assist licensees to improve pipeline management and reduce pipeline incidents. We would ask that you provide frank explanations to each question. If gaps are identified, and this is okay, the licensee is just expected to provide details on how they are going to be addressed and in what timelines. For guidance on completing the form, you can also refer to Clause 3, Annex A and Annex N of CSA Z662. Each self-assessment question has 4 levels of response. The first is yes, meets. This would be meets the requirement noted in the question. This would be the case where the licensee can effectively demonstrate that it meets the stated requirement. The licensee continuously improves existing processes and identifies new processes. A second possible response is yes, for the most part meets. In this case, a nominal amount of additional work is required to achieve a fully working system. Third possible response might be no, gaps are recognized. This response would be chosen when the program is in the initial stages and some steps have been taken to start developing processes. And finally, there is a possibility that you could respond, no, does not meet. This response is when there are no processes or current plans to develop an SLMS. I just want to touch on a couple of things on the administrative elements and general information in the form. We ask if the licensee has had an audit by the NEB or the BCOG within the last 2 years. As noted on the form, if this is the case, the AER is unlikely to choose the licensee for an in-depth review. And there is the request for a contact person on the form. This is the working contact, as it were. This does not need to be a senior official. Next, there are the self-assessment questions. There are 4 of them. I'm not going to go through them, but I want to just say a couple of words about them. The questions are purposely at a high level. They may not have a one-to-one correlation with CSA Z662. Any single question may result from more than one standard. We deliberately chose not to cross-reference each question with an applicable element in the CSA standard, as the point of the self-assessment is not to meet a prescriptive requirement, but to demonstrate that the licensee has an SLMS program that is properly funded, resourced, planned, and implemented. We cannot give you an answer on how much detail you need for your answer to questions. This is not a prescriptive review, but is dependent on the licensee's situation. We are looking for enough detail to understand the licensee's situation, respecting the question. If you have a gap, again, that's okay, as long as you have a plan to address it. The text box below the question is intended to provide an explanation of what is expected in the written report, in the written portion of the response. We want the results to be as accurate as possible to understand the state of SLMS. Again, if there are areas for improvement, the expectation is that the pipeline licensee will identify how each gap will be addressed and in what timeline. The AER will keep track of these commitments and follow up on them to ensure they are completed. The AER will use the responses on the self-assessment form, coupled with other key information, including pipeline performance, compliance history, incident reviews, and incident investigations, and length of pipeline to choose which licensees will have a further in-depth review. And the last part of the form is the declaration. We are looking for a senior official with the organization to declare that there's a commitment to appropriate resourcing for an effective SLMS. Additional information can be included in the submission if you would like to do so. We just ask that you attach the file in a PDF format. As indicated in Bulletin 2017, having a documented SLMS is a regulatory requirement, but completing the self-assessment and declaration and returning it is voluntary. Someone out there might be asking, if the form is voluntary, why would anyone fill it out? I see this question coming from a prescriptive view of regulation rather than an outcome-based view. The SLMS program isn't really about compliance. It is about having a management system that ensures pipeline safety and that ultimately results in fewer pipeline incidents. We want licensees to honestly assess their management systems and address gaps. What will we do if a pipeline licensee doesn't return the form? The question we ask is this licensee unwilling or is it unable to submit the form? In these cases, we will consider whether other information available to the AER suggests that a licensee is struggling with their SLMS. And if so, that licensee would be a candidate for an in-depth review. For example, a licensee who did not undertake a self-assessment when requested, has a high number of incidences in comparison with their peers, relatively poor compliance history, and inspections and investigations pointing to deficiencies will probably be selected for an in-depth review because the AER would have no confidence that they are working towards an effective SLMS. The letter that is sent out to licensees to complete and submit the self-assessment and declaration has instructions as to how to locate the self-assessment form on the AER website. The letter also gives the email box that the completed and signed forms need to be sent to. We would ask that you rename the document to your 4-letter BA code. For example, if your BA code is X123, then the file name should be X123 SLMS. For this program, there are 2 key critical success factors. The response rate of the self-assessment forms is one factor. A high number of self-assessment forms returned to the AER is a positive consideration for us as it indicates that industry is undertaking the self-assessments, critically reviewing their management systems, and identifying ways to make their management systems more effective. Gap closure is another critical success factor. Where gaps are being identified and addressed will have a positive impact overall on SLMS effectiveness and pipeline incident rates. Not all licensees will be cycled through during this initial tranche of letters or even included every 3-year cycle. There will be some licensees that we will be cycling through on a 3-year cycle based on the licensee's performance, compliance history, results of incident reviews, and how this correlates with the licensee's self-assessment and their commitment to address gaps. The next tranche of letters is expected in Q1 of 2018. It will be based on licensees having a higher risk profile. That is, we would look at incident rate, compliance history, incident reviews, and incident investigations. Plus, there may be an element of randomness. For example, a pipeline may be considered higher risk depending on what substance is being transported and the location of that pipeline. For example, if it is near a highly populated area. This program is intended to improve the state of SLMS overall, and the AER is committed to work with industry to achieve this. The program is a desktop review of SLMS elements and should not be confused with AER pipeline field inspections conducted under Manual 5 pipeline inspections. Inspections conducted under that manual will continue to be conducted as they are today. Although AER field staff do not have primary responsibility for the program, we do have many important touch points with them. It is the field staff who collect and generate data for incidents, incident reviews, inspections, and compliance history. The investigations team provides important information on issues observed and root cause analysis. The AER may ask field inspectors to verify implementation of SLMS or other program elements such as the validation of an effective integrity management program. Where industry is not addressing gaps identified during its self-assessment or in-depth review, there may be additional inspections and follow-up to ensure that the licensee has met the regulatory requirement for SLMS. Formal enforcement actions would be used only if the pipeline licensee was not working in the timely manner to address issues identified during the self-assessment or follow-up reviews. In such cases, we would reach out to our field staff for enforcement options which would be in accordance with existing policy and practice under Manual 13, Compliance and Enforcement Program. And again, we will use the information collected to inform us as to who receives the letters requesting a self-assessment and where the AER will go for the in-depth review. This is all I have. We'll open for questions now, but if you think of some questions later on, you can send them to this email box and we will undertake an answer for you.